I've hesitated to weigh in on the whole cultural capitalism versus cultural Marxism debate because I didn't really have a fully formed opinion of the whole thing, but I think I've finally understood how this all works. So this isn't really, these aren't really systems that you can critique independent of each other, as some people have attempted to do, to examine the cultural phenomena of capitalism, which I think is more of an incentive system than really a culture thing. But it is ideological in the sense that it has spawned things like libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism. This idea that you need to have maximum freedom, except with the one exception that you shouldn't be able to impose your will on others or harm others. And it's very interesting how this works for a number of reasons. The first being that it plays into the leftist idea of anti-colonization and isolationism, and we'll get back to that in a moment. But capitalism as a system, it's sort of the maximum freedom that these people subscribe to is really antithetical to what we want in a sense. These people are the photo negative of ourselves. You can think of them much less as an ideological construct, but rather as a tribe that's engaged in a hot war with people like us. And we're both sort of playing by the same manual of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, just doing the opposite of what our enemies are doing. And so while we would want to limit freedom to the things that are socially constructive and civilizationally beneficial, they want to maximize freedom, except in the few instances where this would benefit our people specifically. And so this is why you get this sort of cultural capitalism. But it cannot really function in the way that it has without cultural Marxism, because some of the features of capitalism are things that white people like, which is why libertarianism and anarcho capitalism are so populated by white people. In fact, I would argue that these are ideologies that are almost exclusively white. There are very few minorities really advocating strongly for these positions, and yet they never really pan out for their interests. So one of the things that these people support almost across the board is the idea that people should be able to live wherever they want, perhaps within national boundaries if it's a nationalist, but generally speaking, they think you should be able to live with people like yourself if you choose. But here comes cultural Marxism to tell you you're not allowed to do that because you have white privilege and the progressive stack matters, and your history is one of murder and colonization, and you're a bad person for that. And of course, this is all bullshit. But, Eric Stryker made a great point to Sargon of Akkad when he said it doesn't matter that you have all these great points against feminism because they have the institutional power. So fundamentally, your arguments don't matter because you don't have the power to affect change. And this is really this is part of the dialectic. I think that the people that have the best points are always the people without power. It sort of keeps a semi-even playing field, or at least a playing field of perpetual struggle. So on the Marxist side, what is it that these Marxists want that might benefit white people? Well, they want a strong social safety net. They want strong social programs to protect poor people and working class people from falling through the cracks. They want unions and worker protections. These things that they never get. Again, why don't they get them? Well, capitalists don't like the idea of unions. They don't like the idea of a structure that can impose itself on people. Thomas Sowell has railed against unions his whole life, and he made an argument years ago, which I find interesting today. He made the argument that there should be no social welfare programs, that these should be privatized, because social welfare programs only see, I think he said, 30% of the money that is meant to go to these people actually reach the people. Most of it is instead caught up in bureaucracies and distribution processes. And because of that, we should simply privatize it because private charities see about 90% of the money going toward the people it is intended for. Now, it may be that a private system would be much more efficient, but it wouldn't provide the safety that people require. It wouldn't guarantee that that money would be there for them. And as we see with these sort of anti-racist donations that all of these banks like Goldman Sachs and Bank of America are making, these handouts, which are essentially a relief package, are aimed exclusively at people, POC, people of color, instead of white people. White people are not going to see a dime of this relief money given by private institutions because they have they have given it under the guise that it is for fighting racism, right? So fundamentally, these systems don't give us anything. So the skin of neoliberalism is fundamentally both of these systems. You think about it like this. So Jonathan Bowden said it best when he said the cultural Marxists, the Frankfurt Schoolers, understood that. I know that's not proper, but these people understood that if you drop the hard edge of communism, you could essentially influence the entire, three quarters of the political spectrum through academia. And he was right about that. He was absolutely right. But the capitalists also understood similarly that if you simply adopt maximum freedom, you can get all of these anti-colonialists, all of these isolationists, to say, you know what, actually, I do like your system, and so you can influence the sort of libertarians, the conservatives, and now these two groups are basically synonymous with each other, and now you have communists. People calling themselves straight up communists, whose ideology and practice is more akin to anarcho capitalism than it is to communism. These people that are really not fundamentally against privatization or against the free market. In principle, perhaps, but in practice, they aren't. Because this is what neoliberalism is. Neoliberalism is maximum freedom with a progressive stack as a sort of caveat to make sure that white people can never benefit from it. And that is the essence of this kosher dialectic. This is cultural kosher-ism. And they exist to play off each other. They exist to cover each other's blind spots. Just like the liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican dialect exists, these positions exist to cover the blind spots of one another. And the blind spots are the things that entice white people to back these ideologies, and also the things that would benefit those same white people. And you could see this perhaps in the libertarian proclivity to make excuses for why millionaires and the millionaires and billionaires shouldn't be taxed, why these people shouldn't be squeezed for making as much money as they do. A lot of this is because they believe themselves that if the government simply got out of their way, they would be the millionaires, they would be the rich people, they would benefit from these positions, which is palpably false. But it's interesting that they're given this ideology that they would ascend the ranks, they would become the ascendant people if it weren't for this lousy government that's in their way. Meanwhile, the Marxists actually do ascend the hierarchy, and the way that they do it is by denouncing the hierarchy itself. They do it by signaling they're the good white people. They're the good people. They're not racist. They love people of color, and they would never do anything in the interests of white people. And so it's very interesting how these two systems complement or maybe insult each other by making it impossible for us to ever get what we want out of either one of them. And meanwhile, we have people on the right, people who are supposed to be, third positionists, arguing over which one is the primary threat, which is synonymous with arguing over whether Republicans or Democrats are the real enemy. It's not one or the other. It's the whole system. It's the dialect. You have to take a step back and say, no, the third position is not Marxist or capitalist. It is take your phony dialectic and shove it up your ass. That is the third position. The third position is, all right, let's lay out all of these dialectics and let's analyze them. And let's figure out what parts of these are beneficial to us and what ones aren't. And let's take the beneficial parts and put them together in a coherent ideology, which we can then superimpose over our society. And let's take the rest of it, which is all malignant trash meant to serve, a certain other tribe, and throw it in the fucking garbage where it belongs.